You know, the human eye, it's just incredible. Some have called it a miracle of design, an organ of extreme perfection. But for over 150 years, its origin has been at the very heart of a huge scientific debate. I mean, how could something so complex just happen? Well, today, we're going to tackle that exact question by exploring two very powerful and, you'll see, surprisingly different scientific models that try to explain it all.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll just take a moment to appreciate the sheer marvel of engineering we're talking about. Then, we'll jump back in time to Darwin to really get a grip on his original dilemma. After that, it's into the modern age, where we'll look at one computer model that tries to actually build an eye and another that calculates the mind-bending odds against it. And finally, we'll put these two big ideas side by side and figure out what they're really telling us.
All right, let's dive right in. Before we can even begin to talk about where the eye came from, we've got to appreciate what it is. And it's not just some simple camera. It's a living, breathing part of our brain, just packed with the most incredible biological hardware.
Let's do a quick tour, okay? You've got the cornea, this clear outer layer that has 4 times the focusing power of the lens itself. Pretty wild. Then there's the lens, which is constantly flexing to focus on stuff that's near or far away. At the back, you have the retina, which is, and this is wild, literally an extension of your brain, and it's jam-packed with 120 million rods for seeing in the dark, and 1 million cones for all your color vision. And all of that data? It gets shot to your brain through the optic nerve at the speed of an Ethernet connection. It's an absolute biological masterpiece.
Now, this insane level of complexity, well, that's exactly what made the eye such a headache for early evolutionary theory. Even the man himself, Charles Darwin, knew it was a huge hurdle for his ideas.
I mean, listen to this. Darwin himself wrote this in On the Origin of Species. He flat out admitted that the idea of the eye forming through tiny, gradual, step-by-step changes seemed completely absurd. Now, he did go on to argue for how it could have been possible, but this quote just perfectly captures the massive scale of the challenge he was up against.
And the core of this problem has a name: irreducible complexity. The argument basically goes like this. A system like the eye has all these interconnected parts: the lens, the retina, the nerve, and they all have to work together. If you take away just one of those parts, the whole thing stops working. So the big question is, how could it have evolved one tiny step at a time if all the in-between stages were useless? Right? What good is half an eye?
And that question, what good is half an eye, is the perfect lead-in to our first model. Scientists decided to take that problem head-on. They asked, hey, can we use a computer to show that there is a plausible gradual path where every single little step actually provides a real benefit?
Now, to make a huge problem like this manageable, the researchers did something really clever. They decided to just ignore all the complicated genetics for a moment and focus only on the physical shape, the optical geometry. The whole goal was to see if a simple flat patch of light-sensitive cells could slowly bend itself into a curved pinhole camera kind of eye, just through tiny random changes that got selected for slightly better vision.
So this is where it all started. The most primitive eye you can possibly imagine. It's basically just a flat line of cells. It can tell the difference between light and dark, but that's it. It has zero ability to form any kind of image.
And this was the target, a nice cupped structure. See, by creating that little pit, light can come in from different angles and hit different cells, which creates a very, very basic, blurry image. But hey, it's a massive upgrade. It's the first step towards a real camera eye.
So how'd they get from A to B? Well, they used an algorithm that basically mimics natural selection. They started with a bunch of those flat eyes. Then they introduced random little changes, mutations, to their shape. And here's the key. They then measured which of the new shapes had slightly better resolution. The fittest ones were kept, and the whole process was repeated, over and over, for hundreds of generations.
And the results? They were pretty amazing. The simulation showed that vision quality didn't just leap from nothing to something. Instead, it improved gradually, steadily, with every single generation. Each little tweak to the shape that resulted in slightly better vision was kept and then built upon. It proved that a smooth, continuous path of improvement was actually possible. So, the bottom line from this first model is this. It shows that a step-by-step path is at least geometrically totally plausible. It answers that what good is half an eye question by proving that, yeah, a slightly more curved patch of cells really is better than a flat one. It gives us a believable physical roadmap.
But a plausible roadmap is only half the story. Now we get to our second model, which asks a totally different question. It's not about the path, it's about the journey.
What are the chances of the right genetic mutations actually popping up to build that path in the first place?
Right, this is the big counterargument. The first simulation was all about shape, but it didn't deal with the messy genetics underneath. To actually build that structure, you need specific proteins, which means you need specific DNA sequences. This next model tries to calculate the probability of getting all that genetic information just by random chance.
Okay, so let's look at the numbers they used. And to be clear, the researchers made assumptions that were incredibly generous towards evolution. They lowballed the number of mutations needed at just 10,000. They used a really high probability for any single mutation being the right one. And then, get this, they factored in a population of 1 trillion individuals per generation for over 100 trillion generations. These numbers are just staggering, and they're designed to give random chance its absolute best shot.
So, after running all of those huge, incredibly generous numbers through their model, this was the result. The probability of the right genetic sequence happening by chance was calculated to be 1 in 10 to the power of 36,970. It's a number so big, it just breaks your brain.
A number like that is basically impossible to wrap your head around, so let's try to put it in perspective. Scientists estimate that there are about 10 to the 80th power atoms in the entire observable universe. That number, every single speck of matter that exists, is just an infinitesimally tiny fraction of the number we're talking about here. The odds are so small they literally defy physical reality.
So the conclusion from this second model is unavoidable and pretty stark. Based on a straight-up probabilistic analysis, the chances of random mutations producing the specific genetic information needed to build an eye are so astronomically low, they're statistically zero. It's effectively impossible.
So, where does that leave us? We have two scientific models with two wildly different conclusions. One says a gradual path is totally plausible. The other says the odds of ever walking that path are basically zero. How can they both be right? Well, the answer to the puzzle is all about what each model was actually looking at. The first model, the simulation, was focused on physical shape. It asked, is a path possible? And the answer was yes. The second model, the probability calculation, was focused on the genetic code. It asked, is that path probable? And the answer was no. They weren't contradicting each other because they were never even asking the same question.
Here's the best way to think about it. The first model proved that a road exists from point A to point B. You can see it on a map. It is physically possible to travel that road. The second model, though, calculated the odds of a blindfolded person spun around 1,000 times, randomly stumbling onto that exact road and then following it perfectly all the way to the end. Just because the road is there doesn't mean the journey is at all likely. They're just analyzing two different but equally crucial layers of the exact same problem.
And that leaves us with a pretty profound final question. This huge gap between what is physically possible and what is statistically probable, what does it mean? Does it mean our current understanding of how evolution works is missing some crucial piece of the puzzle? Or could it suggest that the origin of something as breathtakingly complex as the eye might involve factors that our scientific models simply can't measure? That right there is something to think about.